everywhere I live.
IGN Game Scoop.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to IGN Game Scoop. I'm your host, Damon Hatfield. I'm joined today by Marty Sleva,
Hey.
Jose Otero, and Colin Moriarty,
Yeah.
three gentlemen that were recently in Japan
Yeah.
for the Tokyo Game Show. And I'm interested in hearing about your impressions of the Japanese gaming industry, the state of Japanese games, gamers, consoles. Because when I was there a year ago for TGS, there were a lot of games at the show, very few console games.
Yeah.
As compared to like a show of ours like E3.
Sure.
Like, it just seemed like they weren't that interested in console gaming anymore. But now we're on the eve of the launch of PlayStation 4. Wii U is out there now. I don't know. I want to hear what you guys thought.
Yeah, we actually we were just at lunch with Mitch Dyer, and he made the point. He said Japan is a mobile country now, so not necessarily iOS or Android, but
Japan moves.
Yeah,
the country moves around.
Oh yeah, it's like the island of
Just sort of
Moss. It
floats
just
around,
disappears every once in a while.
Or Colombia.
Yeah, but it's it's very much they play on their phones. They play on their 3DSs. Do they play on their Vitas? They play on their Vitas.
They still play on their
Some
PSPs.
people play on their
don't
Vitas,
they?
Yeah. And
many.
so I think gaming is as prevalent as ever, but it's just a different kind of sort of type of gaming.
It was record attendance this year, wasn't it?
Yeah,
I think something like 200,000, something crazy like that.
So still a lot of excitement about games.
Yeah, yeah.
Sure. Yeah, and Japan's transition to playing mostly mobile or handheld games, that's been like a thing for about 5 years. Like it's predominantly where a lot of the cool experiments end up, I feel. Like you'll see them more on 3DS, or you'll see them more on DS, or you'll see them on PSP, which had a very long life in Japan versus the life that it had outside of Japan.
Yeah, and I think, the biggest thing we saw at any of the stores in the streets was Monster Hunter. Monster Hunter 4 was released while we were there, or the week before we
The
were
week
there.
before on Friday, yeah.
Yeah, and that thing was insane. Like, I have legit, it was like, as, how America's kind of been invaded by GTA, it was the exact same thing, but with Monster Hunter.
Yeah, and they had record sales, like 2 million in 4 days? something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
It was along those lines, not exact. Yeah.
Did they do $1 billion in a week?
Billion yen.
A billion yen?
You know
I don't know how
what?
much that is.
They didn't spend $1 billion in a week, or in whatever that was, too, right?
Yeah,
The total budget for the project.
Yeah, there's like weird. I noticed a weird confluence of like different kinds of data, right? Like that we were seeing, like things we were, anecdotal evidence and just numbers from, the sales charts and stuff. We talk about Monster Hunter, right? Monster Hunter sold like 2 million copies, or a little more than that probably, in a week. In its first week on Media Create sales. Now, that's a country with 1/3 the population of the United States. And that is a country that only has about 12 to 15% of the gaming demographic for the world, right? They don't sell many games there. In equivalent numbers in the United States, Monster Hunter sold like 8-9 million copies over there. So that's a significant game for that population of people. And these games don't happen very often, but if you look especially at Nintendo 3DS sales, not only hardware, but games, when they come out, even a game that has soft sales, like that new Mario and Luigi game, right, that came out, had soft sales in Japan.
For
sold,
3DS?
Yeah, it sold like 300,000 copies. That's 1 million copies in the United States. So, and that hardware continually pushes and sells. Even Vita, that struggles mightily there by selling 6,000-7,000 units a week, is selling more there in a week per person that is in the country playing a game than it does in a month in the United States. So, gaming's actually strong there, but like we were saying, it's strong in terms of mobile. And I don't mean necessarily only phones, but also like 3DS and Vita. Because if you look at it in the other perspective, PS3 has sold 75 million copies around the world, but only 9 million of them have been sold in Japan. So the numbers are softer for a console sale. So it depends on like what you're looking at. Plus, I think the biggest booth at TGS this year was Grease.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Really? It wasn't Sony? Sony had a crazy booth.
Sony did have a big booth. It was a lot of empty space though when you look at it. A big PS Vita TV place and stuff like that. Xbox also had a pretty substantial booth, but
That's right.
it's just a little bit different over there. I don't think that I don't think that you got to kind of compartmentalize it in a way and figure out like what you're looking at. You're looking at handhelds, you're looking at mobile. I think the console sales are certainly flagging there. I think Wii U is getting destroyed over there, for instance. I don't know if it's going to be any better for PS4. It certainly probably isn't going to be for Xbox One.
Yeah, it was interesting too. We did a big sort of pre-event at Namco Bandai headquarters, and they showed off Dark Souls, which was really great. They didn't show off anything next gen. They wouldn't even talk about next gen. And then it seems like a bulk of their franchises have become these sort of free-to-play experiences. So we went in, and the new Soul Calibur they showed is free-to-play. The new Tekken is free-to-play. The new Ace Combat is free-to-play. So these sort of franchises that were pillars of console generations suddenly are being displayed in a very different and strange way. So I don't know if maybe we've seen the last of the $60 retail Soul Calibur or Tekken or Ridge Racer. I don't know. It certainly seemed that way from what Namco had to show.
Did you sense any excitement over next-gen consoles?
Not really.
Honestly.
The word is like I spent a little bit of time at the Xbox booth specifically so I can play the Castlevania games, and the word is that Titanfall was really popular there.
Yeah.
That might be a game changer. I hate using that term, but a game changer for Microsoft there. But we were talking about just console sales now with games that are big. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is a really good example.
Yeah.
I brought that game home with me so we can mess around with it, do some coverage here. That game sold 500,000 copies in 1 week, which is substantial for a console game there.
Mm-hmm.
But even a game like that with such a Japanese pedigree with 30-year-old roots in the manga community there and stuff like that didn't push huge numbers.
Yeah.
Even when you compare their relative population size. So. I think and I think they're a little dissatisfied with PlayStation 4 being late there, especially because we're finding out every day that PS4 is coming out sooner almost everywhere else, like South Africa, South America, places that are burgeoning markets for Sony, but like they're still neglecting their home territory, and there's a reason for that because they know that they're going to win there. First of all, they're going to beat Nintendo and they're going to beat Microsoft in the console space there. They know that, and the games aren't ready because no one's making them over there. There's just not any deep down is. The only super Japanese-centric game I can think about even on PlayStation 4 right now.
Did you get to check that game out?
I did.
Yeah. Your impressions were,
Yeah.
Stiff and weird. I couldn't really read the screen.
Yeah.
But it just wasn't.
Because it's in Japanese.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and there was a lot. Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of menus and a lot of kind of combat data. But yeah, the game. A lot of people were making Dark Souls comparisons, which I don't necessarily agree with. The game felt strange.
At a glance, it looks a lot like Dark Souls.
It looks a lot. I have the same camera,
same.
same sort of medieval dark fantasy. But yeah, I mean, the game was pretty, but it didn't feel good to me.
Yeah, it's procedural, which is cool. There's certain things about the game that are neat, and I felt a very similar way when I first played Beyond Two Souls, when I was like, I don't like this.
Yeah.
And I ended up actually liking it a lot more when I really had to sit with it. So. It could be the same thing here, but they're not ready for the next gen because I don't think the developers over there care. Because when I was at Namco the day before we had our event there, talking to the Tales team, more of that on IGN. There's a lot of stuff I talked to them about, but they're not focused on next gen at all. And even Inafune with Mighty Number 9 or something like that, his stretch goals bring the game to PS3 and 360 in 2015. It's there's weird things like that where. I think in the West, we'll be making the jump much sooner than that, and who knows how these consoles resonate.
Yeah.
As you made your way around Tokyo, what sort of video game advertising did you see on billboards or on TV?
A lot of Monster Hunter.
A lot of Monster Hunter.
Everywhere.
Yeah,
that and
GTA.
Hatsune Miku, believe it or not. The Blue Diva thing. You don't need to know. But those games are out
That
here.
game just came out, or one of them just came out here recently.
Yeah. Do those sell well
They're
here?
both huge.
No, I think this is really it's there's a Vita version that never came out here. This is a PSN version. I'm sure it'll sell well to a niche of people. But a lot of Monster Hunter.
Yeah.
When we went to Akihabara, that opened up a little bit into a lot of very Japanese centric RPGs and 3DS games being shown off, but. And GTA was definitely being shown too, which is cool.
Which is, I think it releases in 2 or 3 weeks there, but people seem excited.
But not too much. Not too much from a diversity of games. I would say.
Yeah, at the show itself, I know a lot of people were really excited around the Square Enix booth.
Right.
And there was, they had new Final Fantasy 13-3 Lightning Returns hands-on, which was really cool. But they also just had a theater running trailers, and it was the same 15 and Kingdom Hearts 3 trailer from E3, and tons of people crowded around and watched it and cheered afterwards. So, I mean, those are kind of the things, those two games seem to be the Japanese next-gen games that people are most excited about, despite the fact that we won't be seeing those for, 2015, 16, if that.
Who even knows?
Yeah.
Even though it's easy to be down on Japan, though, I feel like this generation, Japan has delivered some interesting games that, for example, Catherine, something like Dark Souls.
Sure.
There's a small. It's not as big of a list, maybe as it was during the PlayStation era and during the PlayStation 2 era, but there are still those games that you look at and you go, wow, that's distinctly Japan. Very great art direction, really interesting mechanics.
There's a lot of excitement around Metal Gear Solid 5.
Oh,
too.
yeah.
Oh, of course,
Yeah.
yeah.
And this is the weird thing I'm kind of observing. I'm not down on Japanese games because I'm actually having a lot of fun with them. Dragon's Crown, I think, is another great example of a fantastic game. Tales of Exilia was a really good game, and that game, we're seeing this weird data where a game like Tales of Exilia sells 100,000 copies in the United States. That's the second highest selling Tales game in the history of the series in the United States. Only Symphonia on GameCube sold better, faster. And so there's a weird turnaround going on as we kind of look at Japan and their domestic games as being a little backwards or kind of last gen. The games that are coming over here some of them are selling really well. Dragon's Crown actually sold extraordinarily well on both Vita and PS3 there and here.
Do you have any numbers?
I don't have the American numbers on the record, but I know that it sold hundreds of thousands of copies in Japan and was all over the charts. Even on Vita, it sold a lot of hardware too. So like there's these big games from Square that are coming out in Konami, but like there's Platinum's putting out games, and although they're not selling well, they're putting them out and they're supposed to be good.
Metal Gear probably sold well, but yeah, this last Wonderful 101, yeah, it's kind of struggling.
And of course, like Pokemon is about to come out.
It's gonna be big.
And like
October 12th.
like that's going to be
calendar.
that's a Japanese game, and that's going to be absurdly popular.
Yeah.
So it's we can look with like kind of a wary eye at Japan. I think there's reason for that. Nintendo is a good example of a company that is way behind in HD development, has no idea what they're doing over there with HD development right now. Like they're a generation behind on that. And that's because I think they're ignoring a lot of these companies ignore the progress going on in the West. I think there's like a competitive nature and also a traditional nature over there in game development.
That's very Nintendo.
But I think that there's a lot of promising. I'm super excited about Tales of Exilia too. I'm super excited about Metal Gear. Super excited about even Japanese IP that are being developed outside of Japan, like Lords of Shadow 2, or and I agree, Catherine is like one of the most revolutionary games we've played this generation, and that's a Japanese game. So.
There's also, I think next year at TGS, or just looking at Japan next year, will be very interesting because you'll see the impact of, okay, a guy like Keiji Inafune, big, renowned, known creator, went to Kickstarter to start a project. How many other Japanese developers are looking at that and going, there's something I want to make.
It's performing well too, right?
Oh,
yeah,
my God.
3 million.
They crossed 3 million.
Yeah.
And take into account too, you have conferences like BitSummit, which started last year, which is a collection of independent Japanese developers and trying to get them talking and being more aware of different ways that they can get their games made, either be it Steam Greenlight, be it Kickstarter as well.
Yeah.
I mean, it'll be really interesting to see if this sea change is actually happening. And I think next year, hopefully, we'll see the fruits of that.
Last Guardian will be cool too.
I owe.
Yeah, when am I getting my steak
dinner?
Yeah.
Because I felt it in my gut this year.
No,
that it was gonna be
no, Colin.
Yeah, that was foolish. I'll say this too, just real quick, that we talk a lot about what's happening now in Japan, what's happening in the future in Japan, but what really resonated with me when I was in Japan and in Tokyo is the heritage of gaming and the tradition of gaming there, and it's not quite like anywhere else in the world that I've been.
That's right.
Like there's just those shops like Super Potato and like
Mazurake.
just absolutely outrageous. Yeah. Outrageous. Made the trip for me. Like much better than going to TGS was spending a day in Akihabara. And like if you are an old school game fan, like I picked up all the Rockman games while I was there, Mega Man games. You can buy anything you want there, and it's just remarkable. And especially because the yen is like in the shitter right now, like you get a pretty good deal, a pretty good bang for your buck. So so that was actually the most remarkable part. Is like no matter what, Japan can disappear forever from the gaming scene, right? Like
don't say that.
I'm just saying,
but they'll always have that history.
Go away.
These are the games that like we grew up with. I understand that like 15-year-old kids today can't relate to the way we grew up with games, but everything we played was Japanese, and we were playing games like Sonic 2 or something like that were American. We didn't even really know that those games were actually developed in the States. Like because they still had that Japanese heritage, that Japanese oversight.
Yep.
And today, like we have this big West versus East mentality in this competition. Who much better, the Western RPG or the Japanese RPG? We didn't have any choices back then, and that was awesome because we didn't need them. Yeah. And so that's what resonated with me with the most. I think.
True. Gentlemen, thank you for sharing your insights on your recent trip to Japan. Stay tuned for more from IGN GamesCube.